What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Split Screen D&D, the place where we're attacking all things Dungeons and Dragons from both sides of the screen. As always, my name's Tom Quinn, resident Dungeon Master here at Modern Myth.
And always, I am Josh Winans, resident player character here at Modern Myth.
Sweet. What we got going today?
Well, my friend, we've talked about the low tier. We've talked about the mid tier. There's only one place to go but up. And ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the high tier, the ultimate fantastical moments that can happen in D&D.
High tier D&D. But before we get into high tier D&D, I'm going to need some high tier action from you beautiful people at home. If you guys are enjoying the content here at Modern Myth, we hugely appreciate those likes, those comments, those subscribes. And if you want to help us produce a bunch more content like this, like the DM and the PM video series, like the Rakish Rovers AP, jump over to patreon.com/modmyth.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all so much for everything you've been doing for us.
The support has been unbelievable. Thank you guys so much. But
want to get after it?
Let's get after some high tier D and D.
So I think we ended. We pretty much agree. Like your 11 to 20 is high tier.
Yeah, I'd say I generally, I know obviously linearly that doesn't track.
Right.
I think from the DM perspective of
Yeah.
thinking about the types of challenges, both narratively and mechanically,
Right.
as we move beyond that level 10, I think around the point that, I know this is a very arbitrary hinge, but let's say around the point that a monochromatic fighter is getting their third attack. Yeah, I like I said, there's no
That's
bearing
11.
there. There's no actual. So right, yeah, I think right at that point,
Yeah.
is where.
Yeah.
That it's that third jump, which
Yeah.
isn't that
That's a good
meaningful,
point.
but it's kind of,
Every class has that where they reach that third jump, whether it's level 5 is the first jump or not the third jump, whatever it is. But yeah, there's a jump in each class, and it's around 11,
and it's
12,
around
13.
that ballpark. And I feel like that's about the place where players are robust enough that we can basically narratively start turning, like at level 10, level 11. If the players aren't actively engaging with the entities that are going to make up the final confrontation or their immediate lackeys, like it's no longer they're dealing with the kobolds who were actually servants of this guy who
Right.
helped this person who did this thing, who did,
Right.
now it's literally you're dealing with the guys
Right.
who are causing serious problems. And
Right.
10 levels, I know, is a long time to do that. You've got plenty of narrative space.
Absolutely.
But I think there's no question that you as players can't be interacting with what will be the final confrontation and the players within that confrontation.
Right.
In some degree, you're at a potency level where you can have meaningful exchanges, even if those exchanges aren't outright combat. Or,
Right. Just you know who the players on the field are at this point, probably. Well, so let's because I feel like of all the tiers, high tier is kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say the least popular, but it's the hardest for both sides of the screen. Because we have so many powers, you have so many things to consider.
Do you think that increases the difficulty as a player? Maybe difficulty isn't the phraseology I would use there. I don't know, but
I think it depends on who what your DM's throwing at you. But yeah, you got to be a little bit smarter with your powers. It's you, like you have a laundry list of powers, and when it's Tuesday, blow your load all over.
It's Tuesday.
It is Tuesday. All over an encounter. But before we, I think, delve too much into like the negatives and the positives of high tier, what does high tier mean to you? Like, who are we dealing with? Are we dealing, like, you said low tier is a gritty, mid tier is like the superheroes, right? Where we're now Captain America's, Iron Man's, we're Thor's.
Mm-hmm.
What the heck is high tier then?
Well, I think high tier is the place, and this I think really does kind of depend on how grounded or not.
Oh, that's true.
You have attempted to keep. I mean, it doesn't matter how grounded your campaign is. By the time you're pushing level 20, you're into some fantastical shit. I mean,
riding
don't get me wrong.
dragons.
You could all sit down as a table and go, we want this to be a low fantasy feel.
Yeah.
Where literally level 20 is just you're just the baddest dude.
Right.
You know, you're not fighting gods. You're not fighting.
You're not riding
you know,
dragons into battle. Whatever.
Well, you can. I mean,
but
like,
low fantasy.
if you're gonna do it, it may as well be in 5th edition because like it's kind of what it's made for. But but it's one of these things where I mean, as you were asking that question from the DM standpoint, this is the space. This is, I mean, this really is the money shot of the whole campaign because narratively speaking, now keeping in mind that the story could be going anywhere.
Yes.
At this point, but kind of like the narrative is a ship in a storm,
Right.
And as much control as you're trying to exude over that process, the players are these elements that will not be contained. And as you push closer and closer to the end of that, what goes through my mind for high tier is you have players who have been sitting at your table for months, years, decades, depending on the table. This is take all of the challenges mechanically that come along with this tier. This is the space where everything that's been developing and building, all of the highs and the lows of the campaign leading up to this point, it's time to put your money where your mouth is. It's time for this thing to end in a way that leaves your players going, holy shit, that was a great use of 5 years.
Right.
Holy shit, that was a great use of, you know what I mean? Like
no pressure.
No, I mean, but the thing is I think if you are a forever DM, if you love sitting in that chair, that's, I mean, you know, the worst death to die as a DM is in the collapse of the table.
Yeah.
You know, because much like from the player side, like you have ideas of who Kel's going to be at high level.
Right.
And I think the equivalent would be something along the equivalent is a player death, really. Is like your character dies before you get to realize it.
I'd one up it because like the world still exists without my character in it, so I can bring in another character in that world.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But it might be a deal where you bring in that other character, and the whole time you're going like, man, I really wish I could have seen Kel.
Yeah.
It's that same thing of going like, man, I really wish we could have rounded that story out wherever it was going to end, however it was going to end.
Right.
But ultimately, much like, and for the same reason that you see so many great films, I don't want to say great films, I guess, films that for the first however long of the film are pretty good films.
Right.
And then they end and you're like, oh, you know, the ending really is a make or break territory from a narrative standpoint. I mean, think of any major television series.
Well, goodness, if you're like, okay, continue with your because I have something I want to add to that. But
I don't want you to lose it, but that is just to say, and this is purely a narrative point.
Yeah.
That when I think of late tier, aside from, like I said, the con side of this is all kind of mechanical speaking.
You will talk about that.
But narratively speaking, it's time for characters to finish their arcs.
Yep.
It's time for this broad narrative.
Bring it all together, baby.
It's basically time to justify every minute that you've spent sitting around this table. And I mean, I really think it should care. Like that sounds like a lot of weight.
Sounds like a lot of weight, man.
And it should. I don't think like it shouldn't be downplayed as like, hey, just don't sweat it. Don't sweat it. Sweat it.
Okay.
Serious.
Especially if you're playing a 1 through 20. Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not talking to just DMs out there. Like I think we a lot of times will take that upon ourselves as like, okay, I got to make this. This has got to be it. You know,
no, because we're not responsible for anything. It's all about you.
Well, I mean, you know, but I, you know, this is going out to everybody. You know, it's like you are going to finish this out,
Right.
and you're going to look back over the last months or years
true.
of playing at the table, and those final moments are going to determine, we're the level 1 characters that were all sitting, well, not all of them sitting, but all at that same banquet who got intertwined just by fate.
Mm-hmm.
By the time Rovers are all said and done, realistically, by the time Rovers are all said and done, was that a worthy enterprise of 5 years of our life at the table?
Yeah. Hopefully it's not another 3 years. But yeah, and it's from the player's point, like, you have to wrap up everything that you have been wanting to wrap up. You're getting to the end. And in fact, I would almost recommend that to get into high level tier, you kind of wrapped up your shit.
Well, obviously, mechanically, you still have growth to do until you're 20.
Right, but I'm talking about narratively.
Yeah. Well, I would say that I agree. I know exactly where you're at, and I think I agree as a whole. I just don't want that to be an excuse to stop thinking about your character's growth as having some narrative attachment. But yes,
you have done what you wanted to do as it. Well, I don't know, I'm sorry. If you have like some threads you wanted to resolve, I feel like you kind of need to resolve those so that way you can totally focus, because you're no longer focused on yourself. You're focused on the world or the universe.
And that might actually be a great delineating factor in moving from one tier to the next. I think it's even arguable that as you move out of early tier, don't get me wrong, characters absolutely might have skeletons in their closet and shit they've got to work out through mid tier. They may even have it into late tier. But I completely agree. I think as a DM, I would certainly strive to, and this, I would say, comes with some heavy reading of what's been going on at the table. But I would be striving to allow for the space for characters to have explored their primary character arcs. Pre that pivot into the final push.
And I was saying, like you're saying, you're not done developing as a character, but just you're tying up your loose ends so that everything is focused on X.
Right.
And not always. I mean, I could see like, I wanted to reconnect with my father, and somehow your father helps you defeat the big bad. I don't know. Something cool like that would be neat. But
no doubt. And I would say too that I think, we've talked kind of about the graphing of power curves and things like that. But if you viewed that in a 3-dimensional space instead of just like a 2-dimensional graph, I think as you move from low tier and mid tier in those spaces, you would actually see kind of a broadening of the campaign, because those things that are really important to your character arc might be splaying you out this direction while another character's kind of needing to splay this direction. I mean, look at our campaign geographically, for instance. It's a good example. I think the moment that narratively all of the characters feel good and going, I am one of the few people who can do something about this greater problem. And I've shored up my problems.
To focus on the
that
bigger
shift of focus, I think certainly can lend itself. I think there is a real strength, and I'm glad that you brought that up, a real strength narratively in having all of your players feel unified in knowing it's not like, you're right, we have to stop XYZ from doing XYZ. But I do also have to take care of this thing. We never got McMurtry that cheese wheel, and I kind of feel like we should go back.
Dude, how can you not resolve the cheese wheel quest? You have to. Rats in the Attic and cheese wheel quests.
Here's the deal. I full blown rocks fall any party that doesn't get the cheese wheel. I don't care. I have no respect for the party that doesn't retrieve the cheese wheel.
Well, let me ask you this, because I think there's so many amazing examples of low tier in classic literature and film and all and media, and mid tier even. I think you can even get mid tier. What is high tier? Where can we get inspiration for high tier?
Well, I think that's relative, because I think like we've kind of used Avengers style thought process as mid tier, and I do agree that at mid tier, I mean, you're potent enough to be the only group of people who can do anything about anything.
Right.
The same holds true for high tiers.
Okay.
And so I mean, it just I think depends on your frame of reference, because I think that same reference could work for your high tier. I think to really get to high tier, you kind of have to go to mythology.
Yes.
Because mythology really, like, it's unbelievable that, like, we're doing this as a game around a table.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable that like that was like people lived their lives by the fact that there were these figures out there
Yes.
who were treating with gods,
Right.
and coming back to Earth and having demigod children, and
Right.
like, you know, I mean, if ever high tier D&D has been playing out throughout human history,
Yeah.
it's in Egyptian mythology, Norse
Right.
mythology,
Greece,
Greek mythology.
Roman.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, I think mythology is a really strong place to look. Also, because in all, I guess actually, I think all the ones we listed, it's fair
Right.
to say, the barrier between the celestial, the heavens, and the material
Yeah.
was very, very thin
Yes.
for the protagonists.
I agree.
And that really is a hallmark of high tier play, is being able to reach through those planes in D&D, those planes, or those, you know, the states of being, or however you want to think about them. But it's interesting because short of a Hollywood film that is based on mythology, there's not a lot that's written at that scope. I think there's a good reason for that. I think
Why?
Well, I think it's such a departure from the grounding. And this is interesting to say, because you look at something like Avengers and you go like, there's nothing grounded about this. Literally.
No, there's a lot of grounded, because Captain America is a human. Like, they have humanistic qualities.
No doubt. But there's a ton about it that, I mean, it's straddling that line, which I think is what proper mid-tier is.
I'm about to go on my rant, but you continue your rant, then I can go on my rant.
But I think that there is something to be said for the fact that to fit a narrative that tells a story of the lowly peasant who ends the film by treating with gods into a film space speaks to some of the issues with telling with the narrative problems, which we've already kind of discussed.
Right.
And when we're not talking about high tier in a vacuum, there are some innate challenges to tell a story where at the end your character is treating with gods and killing gods and things like that. We kind of need to start at level 10.
Yeah.
And an audience does not want to meet a character at level 10. They want to meet a character at level 1. They want to know the growth of that character.
Yes.
And so that's where now we have much more than a film's length of time at a TTRPG table. So we have the advantage, but it's kind of a microcosm of what we talked about with the challenges of telling a meaningful story from plowshare to killing gods.
Right.
You know, like that's such an expanse to keep meaningful throughout.
Right.
So hit me with what you got.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this whole subject. We're going right down where I wanted to talk about. So I think low tier is you have humanity at its core, right?
Absolutely.
We can totally relate.
Or you hope so. I mean,
Yeah.
certainly.
And then as you go into mid tier, what I think happens is you have a human, but you have some underlying like god powers, right?
Yeah.
You're getting there. You have your Captain Avenger, or Captain Avenger. Wow. You're having your I'm sorry.
I'm pretty sure, like, if you go to the dollar store, you can find the Captain Avenger action figure. I'm positive.
With shield and Thor hammer.
It comes with both.
But
That's fantastic. Yeah.
You're welcome. But you have your superheroes who are beginning to mirror the abilities of gods, but they're still humans at their core, right? Then you get into late tier, and I think it flips. You have gods that have human qualities. And that's hard.
Well, that also mirrors the whole mythology. I mean, so many of those mythologies
And
do a
then-
great
yeah.
job of.
But in our day and what we relate to, it depends on what where you grew up. I don't know how many people grow up with like worshiping Zeus. I don't think that's as common today as it was
No.
2,000 years ago. So it's harder for us to wrap our heads around that a god is fallible, a god is all these things in this universe, and it's hard to just wrap our heads around that. But I think the more you can interject humanity into the higher tier, the more you're going to find success.
No doubt. I will give you zero argument that, and I think this is a call to DMs and players alike. You are, especially, well, I'll start with players. You are gaining unbelievable power by the end of
Yes.
a 1 to 20 arc.
Yep.
And if your setting is obscenely fantastical, go all out.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of tables and a lot of people's D&D related channels or tabletop related channels in the YouTube space that have identified the potency of grounding your campaigns in something real.
Yes.
Um,
Because once you don't have that, you lose connection to the world
Right,
and your characters.
Right. And so I think that be thinking about the active role. I mean, as a DM, I can say that's something I'm very conscious of. I can only speak for myself, but I would say that there is a role that players can play in that, in humanizing. Don't become, because you are becoming gods.
Yes.
That's make no. I mean, again, depends on your table, depends on
Right.
your setting, but by power level, if you can defeat a god, what does that make you? I mean,
Right.
And so if you are at that power level, I think there are steps that you can take as a player if your intent is to keep some sense of grounding, to still humanize
Yes.
those actions. And I personally, I think that those lend a lot of potency narratively to the story. Now, because I really want to end this video actually kind of on a high note.
I agree.
But I also know that there are some definitive low marks I want
Yes.
to give. And so I want to hit those and then
Yeah.
be able to pivot back to.
And I don't want to get too much into the don't get me wrong. I want to get the negatives. I don't want to get too specific about the negatives. But I think the negative from the player side, if you just have so much shit now, you just have so much, which can bog down play. Also, you'll forget. It's already starting to happen to me, and I'm only like level 11, where I'm like, oh yeah, I have this power. Oh shit, should be
Right.
using that this whole time. But like, that can bog down play, and also like, I don't know. It's just, I don't want to say that you lose like the excitement, but you kind of do a little bit, because like you lose the power jumps as much.
Well,
but-
yeah, I mean, mechanically, I think that bears out
Yeah.
absolutely that you're something I would interject on the DM side, especially for high tier,
Yeah.
especially because likely, if you're running all the way to a 20, likely your players, I'm a little remiss to say this because we sit at a table and we're not at 20 yet, but your players clearly have an expectation that they're going to hit 20 and that's going to be it for their growth.
Yep.
And if ever something has killed a desire to keep going, it's knowing that you'll never gain from that point forward. You better be pretty close to the final encounter,
Yeah.
or your players know they're doing work for nothing.
That's yep.
I
Yeah.
would throw out to DMs out there, think about how you might subvert your players' expectations about what the peak level of power of their player is. If you find yourself in a narrative space where they've hit 20
and they still got
and you
long.
still have a little ways to go.
Yeah, get grab some. Yeah, it's
So think about that for
Yeah.
sure.
But yeah, it's just difficult as a player. Like, that's what drives you. But like, I want to make sure that like I don't want to hit home on the negatives, but like, how can we make it positives? Yes, you get a lot of laundry list of things. But no, I would advise you to know what your powers do and in what situation to use your powers. And that way it hopefully won't bog down as much play. I have this power. I use this power when this situation occurs. I have this power that happens then. And that way, hopefully, because I think that's the problem with a lot of like encounters. It's like I can move mountains. I can change reality right now. I can change it. Is this the time to be doing it? Well,
Right.
if you're constantly weighing, is this the time to change reality? It's going to take forever.
Right.
Yeah. It's
And I think that kind of what you're tapping on the shoulder right now, that paralysis of analysis that can occur on the player side, that certainly is one of the pitfalls. And I absolutely think it's one of the places. It's interesting because I actually think that as you move through the tiers of play, it becomes more incumbent, and it's a little unfair to players because they haven't had to take responsibility of pacing in the same fashion. Whereas, I mean, certainly they do.
I was about to say that I don't agree with that completely because I feel like you should be in control of pacing.
No,
but anyway,
but to a different extent.
Yeah,
And whereas I think as a DM from session 1 to session 20, you know, there are 3 levers here that I got to go like, okay, keep pacing.
Yeah,
good,
I know,
gotta,
dude. I know you have so much on your plate. Yeah.
But the thing is that as you move into especially high tier, but again, with every level you gain, I think a little bit more of the opportunity to take the reins on pacing lands on the player side of the screen, and players who are committed to doing that can really alleviate a lot of what makes high tier play not cool. And I say that with, you know, I mean, high tier play should be the coolest. Should be.
But I think you're kind of hitting on it. Like I'm all droning on about the player character side, but I think so much pressure is on the DM side to make this tier the most fantastical thing that could ever exist. So, like, talk to me about that.
Well, I think like I would be very surprised if polled that the vast majority of DMs don't consider high tier to be the worst tier. And the main reason being, and like I said, not because, I mean, something I'll say is there are aspects of the monster manual, aspects of homebrewing monsters that you simply aren't going to have another crack at for, it might be 3 years until you get another crack at it. So
many cool monsters.
So really cool high level stuff that you can do.
Yeah.
But a lot of that high level stuff comes with increased complexity on your monster turns. And, you know,
Legendary.
The complexity is going up, up, up.
Yep.
And with that complexity comes, here's the thing. No one ends a combat encounter and goes, man, every turn was so complex. Like, it took me 10 minutes to decide what to do on my turn. That was the craziest and best combat we've ever ran.
Right.
No one says that.
Right.
When a combat feels like combat, when it feels like the pacing is bearing down on you,
right,
you're making agile decisions on your turn. That's what feels great about combat.
Right.
And every tier, it gets harder to do that, which doesn't mean that you can't. It means you have to work harder, in some cases much harder, to attain that. And that's why I give a nod to the players who are going, okay, I've got, like, kind of like you said, I've got 10 things I can do on my turn.
Right.
Let me eliminate 8 of those before my turn even comes up.
Right.
Cool. Now I've just got 2 options that are reasonable for, you know, however you manage your turn. All I would say is you're getting into the space of, like, buck up, because when your turn comes around, if you literally are looking at every option you have at your disposal, that will be a 15-minute turn.
Yep.
And that combat will be a session plus. You know, and that is not what you want out of it. Doesn't matter how important, and it doesn't even matter how, I mean, you might even be able to build a lot of tension into that space.
Yep.
But it will never compare to the tension that you'll build when your turn comes around and you go like, shit, given everything that's going on, this is what I'm doing.
Right.
Boom, next person. This is what I'm, you know, as you move through that. Now, paralysis of analysis side of things, like I said, I don't consider that a failing of the player. I think there are ways you can mitigate it.
Yeah.
But
We never
I-
fail.
I consider that I consider that to be actually a failure of the system. I mean, there's just no two ways about when you hand someone 15 options,
right.
they want to consider their best option. I mean, and you can't fault a player for wanting to do that. But so there's that side of it. The other side, which is completely built into the system, is simply the fact that the footprint of a turn is increasing. And a good example that I would use, and I think this is particularly pertinent for martial classes, because casters and half casters have a few more decisions to make, at their disposal, and so
spell slots and spells. Yep, yeah.
But I'll use Katarina for the example from the Rakish Rovers campaign. So she is a rogue. She's dipped 5 levels into fighter. So she's got the second attack. She's battle master. So she has some options with regard to the battle master.
Yes.
But on the most cut and dry turn that she has these days, it is she dual wields. So we've got kind of the main hand offhand going on. We've got these days, oftentimes she will be hasted because wizards at late stage D&D have haste often. So there's that consideration. There's the consideration of sneak attack. There's the consideration of having your second attack through fighter. Again, it might literally be, I go, okay, and Katarina, what are you doing? And she goes, I'm running up here. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. It doesn't change the fact that she's doing 6 different attacks over the course of her. I mean, you can't fault a player for just maximizing their turn.
No.
Especially if they've been expedient in deciding how they're doing it. So that's natural. It's going to happen.
Okay.
And I think there are some techniques at your table. It's certainly worth noting. And maybe I think there's actually a separate video to do specifically on techniques to implement from a pacing standpoint.
Okay. Things
like rolling attack and damage simultaneously.
Okay. Yeah, we've talked about that.
There's all sorts of things that you can do. But those compound at high level. So if you're feeling like whatever your system of running combat is bogging down and you're at level 5, maybe find some ways to implement some means of lubricating that process, because it's only going to get more bogged down as more dice need to be rolled, as more attacks are taking place on a per turn basis, those types of things. So that to me is the downside. As a DM, you are putting in way more effort to produce the types of challenges that kept your players on the edge of their seat. There's only one edge of their seat. So at level 1, when you threw a band of goblins at them and they were on the edge of their seat,
shit.
Literally, I went, "There's goblins," and you went, "Oh shit!" Like, so just got dropped. I'm getting,
right.
Now it's a deal where I'm having to go like, well, this demigod, and they're doing this crazy thing, and they're twisting reality in this way, and you're still on the same edge of your seat. But I think the workload to achieve that only increases, and that's, like I said, I consider to be, whether you want to call it a failing or an obstacle, that's baked into the game. There's no, I mean, it's not, there's things you can do to improve your situation, but it's something to consider as a DM is you're going to be paying your dues as you go later.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I don't see any way around that. I will say, like, maybe, I think I don't know if we talked about it, the attrition, like, you don't have them have a full rest every third encounter. All right, time to push them. Let's see what they do with 6 encounters in a day.
Right. Now, something I will say, too, with regard to that side of things, like being in this overtly high fantasy space. And again, however you're commanding,
you got to ride dragons at level 20. I don't care.
Between you and your players, if it's a low fantasy setting, so be it. But as you push it, one of the boons you gain from being in, who's to say you can even rest on this other plane of existence? Period.
Ooh.
That, like, as long as you want to be here, you're here on a single pool,
and so
you can start bending much as you would bend reality narratively,
Mhm.
you can start bending reality for your players' expectations of those spaces because again, I mean, to the same mark, you're probably working even harder because, okay, hey, there could be goblins roaming these halls. Should we rest here? It's like, yeah, I'll stand watch, and if goblins show up, I'll kill all of them, no problem.
Yeah,
You
right,
guys
right, right.
sleep. You know,
Yeah.
it's like you have to get more creative with
Right.
why players can't simply be on top of their game. So
Right.
high tier presents a lot of challenges on
Yeah,
the
yeah,
DM
yeah.
side, but worthy challenges, especially because you're grinding toward that sweet finale, and that's the
Yes,
carrot that's
that's-
dangling there.
Yeah. So if you want to move to the positive side, I think
Yeah,
I think it's
I mean that's
fantastic.
really all I've said. Like I said, I think
Yeah.
DMs out there know this is a space you're going to be challenged in to provide those experiences to your players.
I will give one. I had a thought, and I want to move on. That to help DMs, instead of just thinking about combat, throw more like environmental or situational things into your combat. Instead of just being like monsters fight hero. Hey, do you want to rescue these villagers who are being held by a god? Well, then that all of a sudden, like, I don't know, I'm just throwing something out. That makes it way more interesting. That's
Right,
way
right.
more like objectives.
Well, and the backdrop to like naturally when we're thinking high tier, we're thinking about these expansive, unbelievable backdrops, whether that's a different plane of existence, whether that's
Oh, that's fun too.
don't just let that be flavor. Let
Yes,
that
be
carry
real.
mechanical. So for
Yes.
instance, you were talking about riding the backs of dragons, okay?
Sure.
Let's scrap the riding connotation.
Okay.
Let's just say this is a full-blown combat taking place on the back of a dragon. So now talk about a high tier
Right.
backdrop.
Right.
Well, what are the implications of being airborne?
Right.
And
Do you have a
know,
dragon saddle? Do you have your dragon lance? Like,
yeah. And so you're talking about just a very
yeah.
like they're and the kind of to match the outlandish nature of the reaches of power that players are going to, you kind of have free license to go like, yep, this whole fight's in 0G. That's
Yep.
where you're at. That's
Yeah,
what's
well-
going, I mean, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it like at first level,
in
it's
the
like,
City of Brass.
this
it's like-
feels weird. Like this doesn't make any sense.
right.
Things rapidly stop making sense when you
Right.
begin permeating the God barrier.
Yes.
And
It's yeah.
or at least it's not something where your players are going to look at you and go like, really this whole fight's and it's like,
Yeah.
yes, really.
Yeah.
You're a level 19 character.
This is
Fucking
happening.
Buck up, buddy. Like, so
Look up, Buttercup.
so
Yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
so I just want to mention that. But yeah,
no doubt.
positives. This like you get this, you get resolution in the high tiers, right? You get to see everything come together in hopefully a meaningful way. I mean,
And I think by late tier, almost any resolution is a meaningful one.
hopefully.
Because at level 6, say your character dies.
Yep.
That could be a really meaningful death. It could not.
Yeah.
At level 18, your character dies.
Probably meaningful.
It was probably me. I mean, you've been with that character for 18 levels. Don't get me wrong. You fall off the back of a dragon and it's 1,000-foot plummet and you're just dead. That's not that meaningful.
Right.
But presumably at 18, you're getting into some shit that means the difference between.
Yeah, people will still speak of your character.
Right. So and I think that goes for the final, the actual, the
Oh,
true
gosh.
finale
Yeah.
is whatever happens in the true finale. And this is a point that I think certainly lands in the high tier space because that's not to say your finale could be at level 7. You might be running a 1 to 7.
Yeah.
You might be running a 1 to 3. You might be,
Right.
but I think as long as your characters want to keep exploring those characters, or I
Right.
say your players want to explore those characters, and the DM wants to keep it, developing a world space for them to do that in, eventually you hit 20. I mean,
Yeah.
there's just no two. And when you get there, whatever the conclusion to that story is, I mean, honestly, at level 20, a TPK is still a meaningful end.
Yes.
It's not the end you may
Well,
want.
yeah, it shouldn't be rocks falling, everyone dies.
Well, no. But I'm talking about, I mean, if you're at level 20, it means that you're very likely engaging in the activity that the
From
entire
level 1,
the
even
entire
building.
campaign has been
Yeah.
preparing you to engage in.
Yep.
Even if you're not successful, there's got to be some meaning in everything you've done up to that point. And so, I completely agree with, and I think that, I mean, this, I don't think there's much to be said. Again, we're talking in a vacuum here about high tier. There's not much to be said negative about that narrative space, because naturally you are in the climax / resolution space of the entire story arc.
Yeah.
Which is the coolest. I mean, literally, it's the it's the moment in every film,
Right,
that all of the clips in the trailer, if it's a big action film, it's like you pull all the clips from that trailer, it's like, oh, they all culminate right around this point right here.
right.
And I think that it's a spot that everyone wants to get to. I actually think it should at least be noted that high tier, to some extent, especially if you're starting at level 1, there is a certain badge of honor. There is some.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Because I think there are many players who have a lifetime career in tabletop RPGs, who maybe one of their characters has been into the high tier space.
Yep.
And now I'm talking about getting into like the 16, 17, 8, I mean, like a surprising few number of players, I think, have taken a character from level 1 all the way to 20. I don't think it's that many.
I think it's very rare as well.
And like I said, that's not to say that there aren't many people who have ran a 15 to 20. Because
Sure.
it's a fun place to explore. But I really do think that
1 through 20.
A 1 through 20, I mean, it's a commitment. And I think there's a lot of people who actually, I think, avoid that. I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, there are entire rule systems to stop you from getting to mid and high tier. I mean, it's to continue to make the game meaningful without pushing you into those spaces. And so that says something about kind of the thoughts and feelings on mid and high tier play, or at least high tier play. So
yeah. I don't know, man. It's such a weird tier, and it's I understand there's so much why it's not many people want. I don't know. It's not my favorite. I see potential there, but it's just so out there that it's hard to wrap your head. I think, again, low tier and mid tier, you can wrap your head around. High tier is just such a different animal.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing, and this can even be kind of my summarizing statement, my wrap up here, is if we're talking about high tier in a vacuum, I mean, how can you not love talking about high tier just as high tier?
Well, I was about to say, as a character builder, like, I've been building this character from level 1, and I want to see this thing actuate at 20.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting because if we're just talking about high tier, it's like there's awesome stuff happening.
Yeah.
I mean, there are definitely challenges on the DM side. I think there's challenges on the player side too.
Yes, absolutely.
I think both sides have to put in a little extra work.
Yep.
Maybe a lot of extra work
for DMs. Yes. Yeah.
To achieve the same dramatic flair that you might achieve in lower tiers. But high tier is interesting because when I'm thinking about high tier, I can happily have a conversation about it like we're doing now.
Yeah.
But realistically, I need to be having a conversation about high tier relative to everything else.
Yeah.
And the difference is if we started low tier, I love high tier. I love high tier.
Because you earn the high tier.
If we started way back there.
Yeah.
And I think you can do all sorts of exciting things by starting a campaign late and running through it.
Yeah. Not saying run your table however you want.
High tier is, I really think it loses a lot of its meaning unless you just go, I've never got to run that 20 character that I've had in my mind.
A one
I
shot
really wanna
20. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, it's like, but a one shot 20 is an exercise in the mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons.
That's why you're doing it. Yeah. I feel.
And I think 100%. It's hitting 20. Like when I think about the Rovers campaign.
Okay. Are we going to reach 20, do you think?
Oh, yeah, we'll reach 20. Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope we'll reach 20. I think we'll reach 20. When I think about hitting 20 and knowing how close we are to it being done, like that being it, that is a really weird place to be. Given everything, like, I mean, I can already say definitively that when we hit high tier, or I should, I actually think we're technically in high tier, but when we hit 20, that's, I think, mechanics aside, that's going to be a difficult place to be because even all the possibilities of what comes next, what do we do for our next campaign? What do we do? It's the equivalent of getting to the last chapter in a book you've loved.
Yeah.
And knowing that you're going to finish these next 20, 30 pages, whatever it's going to be, and that's going to be it.
Yeah.
And you might love it, and you might be able to revisit it. And I mean,
but that's it. It is done.
But even revisiting it, you will never experience it for the first time again.
Feels like the first time.
And so I think that when, again, talking about it in a vacuum is one thing, but high tier gains all of the upsides.
Yes.
Are lent to it by mid and low tier.
Yeah.
And
I'm in the same camp as you are.
And I think to a greater or lesser extent, I will happily incur the added effort going into late tier because you guys have earned that late tier.
I like that.
I think, you paid your dues at 1 through 5. You paid your dues.
And hopefully you're invested as well.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, you're not just sacrificing all this stuff.
And I think that's the thing is, again, late tier is kind of the promised land. So many tables sit down going, we're running this 1 to 20.
All right.
And come level 6,
7,
8,
whatever,
10, 12, whatever it is, things fall apart. And late tier just remains this thing out there too. And so it, to some extent, it holds, very true to our analogy, this mythological place in Dungeons and Dragons that characters have the best intentions of getting to. DMs, I mean, I can say for myself, and I think that this will ring true for many DMs. We sit down running session 1 because of the payoff of running the last session level 20. That's the payoff of because again, I mean, that's where you're going to land.
Right.
That's
where
if
you're doing 1 through 20 for sure.
Right. And like I said, I mean, there's so many different configurations. I think that's the place that I round the entire conversation out at is the labor is going to increase on the DM side.
Yes.
And
the player side, but
both sides, absolutely.
But definitely the DMs.
But it's a labor of love if you have as a table come together to get to that place. Because it's been, much as we've harped on so many other episodes and so many other places, you're not going 1 to 20. without exercising the communication, the respect, all of those foundational things.
Yep.
And I think it's kind of a testament as all of you move into that late tier space of we must be doing something right.
Right. Yeah. Let's embrace this thing
we're
that
here.
we found. Yeah.
So let's get after it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's about where I would end it.
Yeah.
Because the very next rover session, we're basically there.
Yeah.
So I will leave it with the let's get after it.
Well, goodness. Yeah. We have Katarina's whole story arc to go through before we can even.
We've got a ways to go.
Yeah. And then.
But true to my word, I'm going to give her as much opportunity as possible.
She is your wife, so you gotta give her
to have hers wrapped up. I don't want. I really would like you guys to be focused on the finale.
That's what I think.
Unimpeded by your individual.
That's what I feel like high tier, and wherever it is at your table is where you start to focus less on your character as a person and more your character as what they are doing in the world around them too.
Right.
I think that's a huge takeaway. But yeah, I think high tier is hard. High tier is hard.
I think it's a tough one to it's also, like I said, I mean, I think objectively the vast majority of people in the tabletop RPG space have spent the least amount of time there. I mean, it's only natural unless all you do, or maybe you're running like some weird Benjamin Button campaign where you start at 20 and every so often you lose a level.
That would be a freaking weird.
That would be actually a nuts campaign. I'm not saying nuts in a good way. It'd just be a weird. Anyways, food for thought there. I'm going to say that's the first. That's an OG. If anybody out there ends up running a Benjamin Button campaign, I want royalties on that.
We need our money.
You got any other wrap up on the player side?
Oh man, I think we're good.
How do we want to take this out?
All right.
Oh, I know how we're going to take this out. What am I asking for?
Yeah, you don't need to.
We have heard a level 1 character give a world is yours. We have heard a level 10 character give the world is yours. The big bad, I should say the corpse of the big bad.
Oh, we have defeated the big bad.
Lies at your feet, along with many a friend and foe. The world as you have known it will never be the same, in great part due to the efforts of you and your companions. And as you stare out at those who remain, those few who remain, looking for some guidance in the expanse of the unknown that is to come, you need to let them know that the world is theirs.
We have done it. We have fought. We have died, and we've been broken, and we have been reborn again, and here we stand. We will not go quietly into the night, for we are the champions. They thought they could beat us, those gods, but no, here we are. Let us never forget those who fell. But let us not tarnish their memory by dwelling in the negative. We will rebuild this world, not as it was, but as it should be. For did you know, the world is not mine, but the world is yours.